Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And we are so delighted to have you join us today. Happy New Year, everyone. And what a great way to start the new year with today's show. And when I introduce my guest, you're going to know why. Before I do that, Amnon, good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, too.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How was your New Year's?
It was good. Really, really, really good. Really good. A great time for creating. So everyone, welcome Amnon. He is our producer, and he's handling everything on the side and all that good stuff. So we really couldn't do this without him. So let me just remind you all, you are more than welcome. It's an invitation to join the show anytime you like. You can call into our studio at 919-518-9773, or you can Skype in with us to Computers 2K Voice. Anytime you want to take part, ask questions, and really get into it, because this is a great time of year to do that. And we have a wonderful guest. So let me introduce to you my friend, Chris Hively.
Hello. Hi, Marilyn.
Hi,
Happy New Year to you as well.
It's so good to have you here.
It's great to have me here, too. I love this thing.
Chris has been here before, and we just love him because so many things. First of all, he has a company called Startup Factory, which he will tell you all about. He's been here before talking about that. And he is the co-founder of MapQuest. So pull up a piece of paper, a pen, get your ears open, because you're going to hear some things that you will be able to have the biggest call to action, as soon as we get off the air, and maybe if you can't wait, right as we're speaking. Because this man knows what he's talking about as far as entrepreneurship, being creative, starting new things, taking ideas, and rolling with them. So Chris, is that good?
It's awesome.
So you just wrote a new book.
I did.
Tell us about that.
So I just wrote a book called Build the Fort, Why the Lessons You Learn as a 10-year-old Will Serve You Well to starting anything, basically. Whether you're starting a company or maybe starting, as I joke to people, whether you're starting a company or maybe starting a business inside of a company, or starting the first over 50-year-old men's hockey league in Durham, North Carolina. You need to channel that inner 10-year-old, and those lessons actually would serve you quite well.
So what were those lessons?
Well,
how was I as a 10-year-old?
Yeah, I don't know. You tell me. No fear, probably.
No fear.
So, the great thing about what you are as a 10-year-old are that I believe that fear is the one thing that stands in our way as adults to kind of getting anything started. And so to that end, when you think about when you're 10 years old and you come back to kind of those times, and I tell people when I speak, I'm like, all right, close your eyes. Think back what you're doing. It's the summer. You're 10, 11, maybe even 12 years old, and you go do things. It starts with something as simply as, hey, Chrissy, do you want to build a fort? And your response is, of course. And it's not like, I don't know, are we good enough? I don't know if that's a good idea. Like all that crap that we put on it as adults. And so Build the Fort kind of opens up that and says, all right, channel your inner 10-year-old and follow these 4 or 5 simple steps.
You say it's a team sport. And it's because of that it's a team sport, right? You couldn't build. Well, could you build a fort by yourself?
I guess for a little while, or maybe a small fort, but, anything that's got a little bit of complexity to it. And by the way, forts are anything from, a couple chairs overturned in the living room with a blanket and a the broom to hold up the blanket, for the peak, to that, the forts that I built, which were kind of outside in the woods, where we had to, borrow some wood from the neighbors, and I needed to get help from, my brother, Timmy, and Marky, and Jimmy, and Danny, because, we all had to end in Y because we're 10, right? So, so it applies to all kinds of forts. And, what I tell people is that I think we were talking about it a little earlier, we're only as smart as what we can be, but we can be much smarter when we involve others. And that's the part about being a team sport, is that when you can get other people to engage in what you're doing in a really kind of passionate way, then there's so much power in that. So
why, it was always important when we were growing up. why is it even more important now to come from that kind of a perspective? I mean, and with the knowledge with your new book, and Amna, maybe you can show that. Can you show the picture of his new book? So take a look. Here it is. It's on Amazon. We'll talk about it a little bit later too, and we'll keep on talking about it because it's going to be our point of reference. But why is it so important today to think in terms of entrepreneurship being a team sport?
Well, I think there's two pieces in that question. The first is that I think more and more, and we're seeing this all over this is our economy is going to be based on not going to work for Ford Motor Company or IBM and being part of a huge conglomerate. It's going to be working for small companies, whether you start them or whether you're going to go work for someone else's small company. Everywhere you read, I mean, our economy is based on, the large majority of people work for a company. I think that's less than, I don't know, 15 or 25 people or something along those lines. So to that end, you have a chance to take control of that or not take control of that. Another stat that I just read recently is that the millennials now make up the largest part of the workforce as of the end of 2015. And I can tell you, having worked with lots of people of this age group, is that they don't operate like we operated or like our fathers operated. They want to have more control over their career. And all of these things conspire together to say that we're going to see more entrepreneurship. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to actually start your own company, but maybe you'll go to work for another small company and be an integral part of that. So with that, so the first part of your question is, why is entrepreneurship important? I think it's going to be the basis of our economy going forward. And you either get to be part of that or you get to be on the sidelines of that. And, people our age have to kind of wrestle with that. I don't think there's ever an age limit on being an entrepreneur. At the Startup Factory, one of our best companies were two 50-year-olds that came in. So, it knows no bounds. We'll get to the risk, fear, how do you handle that as a with mortgages and kids and cars and that type of thing. So entrepreneurship's important. It's going to be more and more important to a greater part of our workforce. So we better get ourselves around that. And the second part of the question about being a team sport is, how do you become most effective at being part of an entrepreneurial journey? And for the most part, ourselves and what's in our heads, we're our own worst enemies. And we have to find ways to kind of get out of ourselves and make sure that we can be the best part of who we are. And my whole thing is, there's a couple, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Michael Dell's, people that can take a company all the way to the end, who are super, super smart. But even those guys had really good people around them. So there's no reason you can't start day one saying, how do I surround myself with smart people so that the group is collectively smarter than just me and what's inside my own head?
Well, I want to know I want to know everything you think. Seriously, I know you're all out there thinking the same thing, because anybody who can be one of these guys, including you, who can start a MapQuest, I mean, that's in that same category. You want to know I want to pick your brain, but the same thing, you're humble, which is also really important, because if you understand team sport, you got to be humble. You got to be collaborative. It's got to be more than just about you.
Yeah, totally.
So bring it together.
Well, one of the first things I talk about, kind of lesson one in the book, is to socialize your idea with no fear and inhibition. And what I mean by that is that, an idea stuck inside your own head is pretty much useless. Yeah, it's fun for a little while, but at some point you got to set that idea free. And the way you set that idea free is by taking it out on the road. And you can start simple. Start with your spouse, your significant other, girlfriend, boyfriend, mom, dad, brother, best college friend. It doesn't matter. Start with safe people, but you got to get it out and you got to start to socialize the idea. Here's what I'm thinking. And a couple things happen that are really key when you start doing that. First of all, you start getting some feedback. I don't understand that part. Or have you thought about this? All of those things, if you're listening really well, start to conspire together so that your idea becomes, firmer, better, less sharp edges, right? Because things that you take for granted in your head don't play well outside. So when you start socializing the idea, you start getting this awesome feedback. Some of it good, some of it bad. It's not bad. Even bad advice, even bad feedback is good. It says, I don't like this, or I don't get this. I would never be a customer of this. Well, all right. Well, then I better, we're listening, right? But the second part of that is that when it starts getting tighter and tighter and more people start to kind of respond and they start to nod their head in the right direction, you get confidence, and confidence builds momentum. And I think in the early stages of your journey, you need to build momentum that makes you feel good, makes your team feel good. That confidence starts to come out when you start talking to customers, when you start maybe even hiring employees. And so this positive feedback momentum has so much energy to it. That's my first step. Get out there and tell people and socialize. The older we get, the less comfortable we are with that, right? We're like, I'm not sure whether it's a good idea, and I'm not sure whether I'm good enough, and all those things.
When we get a little complacent, maybe we get a little bit lazy. It's really nice to be home and not do these things, but it's part of our journey.
Well, one of my favorite lines is that when you're the only person in the room, then every decision is perfect, right? Because there's no one that's going to push back. So,
right.
You know what? Eventually, you're going to need. I don't know one business that doesn't need customers or someone else. So, you know what? The earlier you get out and start socializing the idea, the better off you'll be.
Well, what we're talking about is really important because, first of all, this idea of this team sport thing and socializing your idea, bringing it out there, being okay with hearing the, well, I don't know about this, or I don't know about this, and then hearing the, oh, I love this, I love that. It's being able to take all of that and being able to take it back to your studio, back to your office, back to the drawing board, back to your computer and say, okay, what do I got here? The people that are telling you, nah, are you hearing, is there a pattern? Are you hearing something that's so
Right.
valuable that you want to take it back and figure it out? Or are you hearing somebody else's fear that doesn't belong in your wheelhouse with your idea because you've heard so many good things? So there's so many reasons to take things out and to be, put yourself in other people's positions and go out there and hear stuff and take it back and grow the idea and not be afraid of somebody stealing your idea. That's a big, were you thinking that just then?
I was just thinking that right then.
Oh my God, I knew it.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but go ahead.
Well, I the first question when I do this talk track and talk about the book, after I talk about socializing the idea, the first question every time is, what if someone steals my idea? And I have to do this as nicely and respectfully as I can. It's not an issue, guys. It's not an issue whatsoever. Nobody wants your idea. I mean,
that's so true.
Put it this way. If I have the energy to put into something, am I going to pick your idea or my idea? By the way, when I pick your idea, at best, I'll own 50% of the business, right? Because it's you and me. When it's my idea, it's all mine, right? So it just doesn't make any sense. And here's the other part. Your idea, half of it is really bad. You don't know which half it is yet. We're going to go find that out. But so it's not the idea that's going to be the key here. I'm looking you right in the eye. It's not your idea that's going to be the important part. It's how you go and start to put that idea into play, socialize it, get assets, do all the things we talk about that we're going to talk about in the last half of the book. So the key to building a great business is about executing on the idea, not the idea itself. So do not worry about going out to other people and saying, hey, here's my idea. What do you think? No one's going to steal your idea.
I love how you said that because and what he said, I mean, you really have to listen to this because it's really important because your passion, your love for this idea is what is driving the idea. So if you think somebody else is going to take something from that idea, they're going to not want it exactly how you have it. They're going to want to put their own spin on it. It's like a recipe. They're going to want to add a little bit more of this and a little more of that. And guess what? It's not your idea anymore.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to do you like you're going to do you.
Yeah.
Right?
And by the way, so as you start to kind of work on your idea, I mean, it's going to twist and move like, right? You're going to go out and socialize the idea. You're going to get all this feedback and you're going to start to kind of mold it and change it. And it's the part of the journey that actually is the important part. I guarantee you there are 10, 15 other people with the same exact idea doing the same exact thing. So to think that your idea has all the value is really short-sighted. Which is why, we talk about all the parts about executing your idea. That's really what separates kind of the proverbial men from the boys.
So talk about that.
Well, the next thing you got to do after you kind of start to socialize is you got to put this into play. And in order to put this into play, you need some stuff. And the stuff that we usually talk about, it's like building a fort, right? So when you go to build a fort, the forts that I built, I needed wood and nails and, you're 10 years old. So it's not like you went down to Home Depot and, bought the fort kit. I mean, first of all, we didn't have $1,000, right? We didn't even have a second car, right? Because Dad had that at work, right? So what did you do? You walked around the neighborhood and you borrowed, you found some stuff, wood, tarps, whatever. You improvised.
And you just gave me a visual, and you probably already thought of this, but it just hit me that when you built that first fort, you didn't have a plan, did you?
We kind of said, yeah, you have a really rough plan. It's like a rough idea,
It's a rough
right?
idea.
You have a rough idea, but you have to go find the assets that are going to help you kind of build the minimal version of this fort. Remember, we're not building the Taj Mahal. We're not going to live in this fort. As I've told the people, the forts I built had to be able to, our one goal was to have it be dry enough so that the matches, because, fire, you had to make fire, like little fires, right? Because you're 10. We had to store that Playboy magazine that someone stole from their dad, right? You just wanted to keep those things dry, right? Maybe the cigarettes you had borrowed from your mom so you could try a cigarette. I mean, your needs were very simple, right? This wasn't a home. This was kind of a fort. And you should think of the first kind of version 1 of whatever your product or service is as something as raw as that fort. It may be a little ugly, but it serves its purpose. And you kind of figure out what's going, you figure out what you have. And to your point about you have to figure out what assets you need and figure out how to cobble those together. Many, many people I know every one of you out there has an idea of what your business looks like 3 years from now when everything's working perfectly. The problem is you can't get to month 30 without going through month 3. And so how do you figure out how to kind of I always tell people, think in 3 month chunks. Like that first fort is like that first 3 months, right? It's crude, it's cobbled together, it's got pieces of wood that don't fit, but it kind of served its purpose. And then you go, all right, now I got that. Now let's make the roof a little better. Now let's make it a little bigger, right? And you can kind of start to build from there. When you have a scope, which is kind of one of the third or fourth lessons, when your scope is way too big and you reach too far and you execute on something that's like 3 years out, you never get any of that momentum that I was talking about. So it's why you got to kind of start small. And we did that at MapQuest. Before we launched MapQuest, we did CD-ROMs.
So take us back though to the initial where you sat with somebody or you had this idea or just like build us the MapQuest fort.
The MapQuest fort. Well, the MapQuest fort starts in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, home of 55,000 Amish people, obviously the tech capital of the world. Horse and buggies still very prominent today. But, what we had a bunch of eager fort builders, Barry Glick, Jim Hilliard, Perry Evans, and a bunch of other people. We baked MapQuest inside of a larger company, and that company gave us kind of permission to kind of think big. Most people probably out there assume that MapQuest was a Silicon Valley startup or something. Absolutely not. We baked it. We were a mapping company who knew maps and knew people. The one thing we figured out before anybody else figured out is that these technologies, which started with PCs and then CD-ROMs and then eventually the internet, that we were giving people more and more control over their mapping experience. So we're all of age that when we wanted to get directions, we would go to AAA and they'd give you a triptych, right? And it was one side, you know, you were going from Philadelphia to Orlando, not from 119 Northwood Road in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania, right, to Disney World. You went from city to city. And we just said, I think there's a better way. I think we could do more. The technology and the data is out there. So we were just the first, we were, I think, out there before anybody else and understanding that there was a movement to us as consumers, as individuals, having more control, not having to rely on a business to give me those answers.
So I have a question about this MapQuest thing, but before I go into, first of all, Chris, who works with me, she's from Lancaster.
Okay.
So she's writing here. Oh my God, I'm from Lancaster.
Corner of Prince and James Street in an old tobacco warehouse.
Are you from there?
I'm from outside Philadelphia.
Outside Philadelphia. So was MapQuest or ideas like that, is that somebody's, like, wakes up in the middle of the night and goes, you know, I should be doing that, or this would be a really good idea, and then they take it to their fort friends and they go, look, what do you think about this idea? You know, what do you think? Is that how a MapQuest got into being?
Yeah, totally. And that's why I tell, you know, the Build the Fort lessons are drawn from my experience. And throughout the book, I share kind of my stories and my kind of experiences in a way that kind of shows you how I kind of applied the same rules as being a 10-year-old. And, you know, what we had is a great environment where we could say, I wonder if we could do something like that. How would that work? And then we had a company that gave us not just permission, but kind of pushed us to kind of think outside the box and then try stuff and not have any fear about trying stuff.
So you were working for a company at this time when you co-founded MapQuest.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept as well.
So I'm more of an intrapreneur, sometimes people call it, than an entrepreneur. At least my first experience.
So
yeah.
which half was the wrong half in there?
Which half are the good ideas or the bad ideas? Geez,
Keep going.
That's a good question.
And that's interesting because, you know, so remember, we're in the new year, so there's, you know, we're limit free here because people can limit themselves and think, well, I work for somebody. What can I do? I mean, my hands are tied, but
just an excuse.
Just an excuse.
Yeah. You know what? There's, you know, you can do stuff inside your company. You can do stuff outside your company. You know, there's nights and weekends. There's lots of ways that you can kind of get on your entrepreneurial journey. And, you know, that's, if I have one goal out of the book, it's to kind of share with anybody that anybody could do this if they want. I go into lots of detail about how you set yourself up financially, emotionally, physically for the journey. I mean, I think I really became a great entrepreneur really in the last 10 years because it's the first time I really kind of blank sheet of paper, no overhead, didn't raise money, just went out on my own. And now total freedom. And, you know, but by the way, I have children and mortgages and cars and things. And, you know, I've been lucky in terms of, you know, what I've been able to do with MapQuest and some other of those investments. But, you know, it doesn't matter how much money you've made, you're still kind of, money's still an issue, right? So I tell people there's lots of ways you can set yourself up. And it depends, you know, you're going to have to sacrifice, but there's ways to do it. So just doing that thing like, well, I can't, I have a mortgage, I can't possibly be an entrepreneur. It's like, crap, you know, you can. Here's how you do it. If you want it bad enough. If you don't, then that's okay too. Mm-hmm. But if you want to get on this journey, it's never too late. So that's my one. If there's one thing I want everyone to pull out is, if you see you in this book, here's some ways to get started. I figured there was lots of books out there that talked about how you run a company once you got going. My book's about how you kind of get over yourself and how you kind of can take an idea in those first 3 months that you're kind of most,
which is an important part because that's when a lot of ideas get what's the word? Slammed, crammed, done. They don't even get off the ground because we don't let them.
No. They're stuck inside.
They're stuck. How many great ideas? How many times I can speak for myself too. I'm sure you can. You out there can as well. How many times have you had an idea and then month, a year, 6 months, 6 years down, 10 years down the road, you kick yourself?
Yeah.
Because there comes something very similar coming down the pike, and you thought, oh my God, I thought of that already.
Right.
I wanted to say that already.
Right.
I wanted to do that already, and we don't.
I think my idea creative parts that's what's flowered for me even in the last 10 years. Like I figured out how to let them out, and I do it by socializing. They bake inside my head for a little while, and then when I'm like, all right, it's done baking, then I start telling friends, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm thinking about this. What do you think about this? What do you think about this idea? And then some of them still kind of, I think of them like, I call them little thought balloons. And then some of them pop and they go away. All right, that idea didn't have a life. That's already done. But at least I give them a way to kind of get out of me. And that's the part that I personally have had more fun getting my ideas out, because I don't care. I don't have any fear about socializing it.
And let's also say that when they do pop and they go away, maybe that's just the first level pops and goes away for just a little while. And then all of a sudden, one day you're sitting there on
comes back
on a chaise lounge, and you go, duh, that's why that popped. But now let me try it this way. But it was the popping just opened up the door, right? And maybe it wasn't ready yet. Maybe it needed some other socializing or another piece of a puzzle or something. So all of these ideas are so valuable, and
so I feel like I'm going to beat this a little bit dead, but I want to hit it again, Marilyn. And that is that I still see a lot of people who think they have to have all the answers before they
Yes.
take the idea to the
Yes.
next step.
Yes.
And what I want to tell you is you don't have any of all the right answers. You can't possibly have all the right answers until you get it out of yourself. This doesn't cost you anything. To go call up somebody and say, or to network with somebody and say, listen, I'd love 15 minutes, 30 minutes, I'll buy you a coffee. Can I just run this idea by you and see what you think? And all I want is your feedback. You're not trying to sell them on anything. You're just trying to get some feedback. That doesn't cost you anything. You can still have your job, your mortgage, work at the, flipping burgers, or be the senior vice president of Schmuckety Muck at Conglomerate Inc., right? You can do that. And so if you're one of these people, please just come find me. I want to hear your idea. There it is right there.
Okay, so that's a great entree into how they find you. So give it to them. We'll give it to them again.
Sure. So at thestartupfactory.co, not .com, .co is our website. And if you go to contact us, we have open office hours, my partner and I, there's 3 of us, and we do 30 minutes. You sign up for yourself. I have no idea who's going to come, what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you're not in my town of Durham, North Carolina, we can go on the phone. We can go on a Google Hangout or a Skype call, and we do those all day long. And we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. So, and by the way, and if it's not me, there's someone in your town. There's someone else that can serve that role. My point of all this is get it out of your head. Don't wait till you think you have all the right answers. Because I gotta tell you, back to your point earlier, half of the stuff that you're thinking about is going to be complete crap. It's not going to make any sense. And now you've spent all that time getting that locked into place in your mind, and the first thing someone says is, no. All right, well then how about this? Well, I like that one better. Geez, why wouldn't you want to get that feedback as soon as you can into the process?
So let's just say, because I love these kinds of conversations. I just love them. So call in if you want to the studio, 919-518-9773, or you can Skype in with us too at Computers. So that means you can do it from anywhere in the world. Computers, that's plural, number 2K voice. And we'd love to have you that way. And just so you all know, I was telling Amnon earlier and said it in front of Chris before we went live that there was a conference here in Raleigh, North Carolina that I attended, and I wasn't going to, but somebody said, Marilyn, you should go. And usually when somebody says, Marilyn, you should go, Marilyn goes. Sometimes Marilyn goes when people don't tell her. Sometimes she goes when she tells her. But I went, and Chris spoke at one of the keynotes, and I went up to him and asked him if he would be on the show. And he said, sure, but you connect with me. And I'm like, well, of course. What do you think?
It was a test.
It was a test. Well, I passed. That's one of the tests that I passed, because I don't expect anybody to connect back with me. I take the onus on me. If I want something, I'm going after it. I'm not waiting to sit by the phone and, yeah, I'll call you. I want your number too. Even if you tell me you're going to call me. The control, that way I'm a control freak. I want the information so that lots of things can happen. All intentions are good, but people, get tied up. They forget, life happens, and maybe they really decide, I'm not interested, but you give it another try. And then you never know that somebody might just have lunch with you or have a conversation with you, or you say to them on the phone, they say, well, I'm really not interested in that. And you say, well, I appreciate it very much. Do you think if I did it this way, it would be a little different? You get a little bit of something that
Right.
you can't, it's priceless. You can't buy that information. I can't buy this connection that I now have with Chris. Can't buy it anywhere. So I really can't.
But you worked for it and you went out and got it.
Heck yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was me. It was me doing it, just like it's you doing it, just like it's him doing it. It's us doing it. It's not our pocketbook.
Well, lesson 5 of Build the Fort is build the fort. And
Yes.
it's funny because I'd written the
Yes,
book
it
and
is
I had
funny.
4 lessons, and someone said, you forgot the last lesson. And I said, what's the last lesson? Do it. And to your point earlier, you came up to me and said, I'd like you on the show. And I said, all right. I don't know how important that was to you. Do you do that for everyone who walks down the street? And so, and I can't half joke about being a test, but it really is some ways to say, listen, I want to see how important this is to you. And if it's important to you, you'll find a way to reach me. And then you go do it. And the part, so I love this time of year. Like we've talked about it a couple times. This time of year when I always recalibrate, I use the calendar to recalibrate what's important to me, what's not important. Last year at this time, I said, I'm going to write a book. I don't know what it's going to be about. I'm going to write a book. And, I finally figured out, and it took me 7-9 months, and here we are a year later, wrote the book. All right, great. That was very intentional. Like that was a startup. That was an idea that I turned into to me, it's like a startup. Mm-hmm. And so to that end, what I'm telling you guys is that if you want to do this, right, you got to go find the people that are going to be important to you. You need to be aggressive. You need to be focused, very intentional, and say, this is what I want. And then listen, right? Then listen.
That's it.
And you know what? If the idea never leaves your head or you never leave your couch, then then you're not ready.
That's exactly right. Then you're not ready. So here's a really good question from Chris. She asked it a little while ago, but it's such a great conversation. I couldn't interrupt, but here I go. So she wants to know, which is a really good, about female entrepreneurship and on, what special issues are women encountering today, and how are you mentoring them, or how are you seeing them being mentored, and what's some of the differences going on?
Boy, that's a great question. So I have to tell you a little bit backdrop. So at the Startup Factory, we have an investment program. We've invested in 35 companies over the last 4 years. It wasn't until we kind of started doing a backwards review of what we have done and getting ready for kind of our stage 2 of our company that we realized that a third of our companies have women founders. A third.
So are you saying
which
that's
is
good?
2x to what you'd say is an average for any for entrepreneurship. And the beauty about that is that wasn't an idea or a focus, or like we didn't make that happen. We just wanted to select great entrepreneurs. But with that being said, there are different issues. First of all, for any entrepreneur, creating credibility for yourself and your idea is the biggest burden that you have early on. Especially when you're a first-time entrepreneur, you have nothing to go on. And so you have to build credibility. And I do think in the business world, it's sometimes a little harder for women, which means you're going to have to work a little harder to gain that credibility. I don't think it's not an order of magnitude harder, but it might be a little bit harder. And, because what you're trying to do as an entrepreneur is prove to the person sitting across the table, whether that's an investor, potential customer, or whether that's maybe a potential new employee or a partnership, you're trying to prove to them that what you know and what you have has real value that they can kind of take parts of, and you have to figure out how to do that, regardless, male or female. A couple of things that I have that Dave and Lizzie and I have specifically worked on with some of our female founders is knowing that some, especially older people, maybe even older men, sometimes have a small bias, is figuring out ways to not to overcome those things. So I remember we have this one company, one investment that I love called Orate, and they help match emerging speakers and events together. They're at orate.me, and there's two women founders, and I remember sitting down with them early on, and they did their pitch, and it was a little too cutesy. And I said, you know what? You guys already have a little bit of a burden being women. Let's not highlight that. Let's kind of go a little bit lighter on the cutesy. You might have to go a little farther than others in making this really businesslike. Don't give anybody a reason to think otherwise about what, you know what I mean, who you are. Don't let them label you as, oh, it's a woman, she's whatever comes after that, right? Yeah. I think more and more, especially since diversity in the workplace, and especially in my area, the tech area, I think there's a lot less burdens for women. As long as you just go be as aggressive, as focused, as build a fort, as social, as long as you're going to do all those things all in, yeah.
Well, I would say that women don't have to be cutesy, don't have to use cutesy, and men don't have to use manly. I mean, just I
Yeah.
mean, neither one of those can fit.
Well, I've been successful my whole life being me, so I'm just going to be the best version of me, and I like that come flying out of the door.
Which somebody says
Either you buy it or
Yeah.
or you're not buying it. But
well, yeah, but you have, and one of Susiani on the chat said early on when you were talking about being as a 10-year-old, it's Paulie, it's Petey, you're still Chrissy because you're still cute.
I'm still Chrissy. Yeah.
That's what she just said. You're still Chrissy.
Occasionally, I'll sign an email, Chrissy, just to see if anybody's reading that far down.
I bet they are. So you were talking about credibility. What are the things that people can use coming out of the gate that makes them credible for you? And we were having this conversation earlier. So I'll use anything. Sometimes the things I have, whether it's I'm writing a book, can sometimes bring me credibility. I don't even have to have finished the book. I'm writing a book.
Right.
I'm the co-founder of a women's networking group. I do a talk show. I work with a lot of men. I work with whatever I can pick up. And you have a big thing, which is MapQuest. And I'd say, man, use what you have, especially when you use it, not especially, but using it from your heart, it's coming out right.
Yeah.
What do you suggest people use?
So there's two kinds of credibility that you'd like to create early on in your journey. There's personal credibility, and those are the things you just mentioned. Things you've done in the past, things that you can kind of highlight that people say, "Wow, that's pretty special. That's interesting." You've used it to kind of separate yourself from others who haven't done those things, right? So there's personal credibility, and then there's also kind of business credibility. And what I mean is specifically the business that you're starting out. My partner, Dave, has this great line that says, the difference between the entrepreneurs that come into our place and say, I got this idea and I believe it could be when it will be, versus the entrepreneurs that come in and say, well, we've been doing this for 6 months. I have 25 customers. They come back to my website 3 times a week and spend 16 minutes each, and they look at this many things or click this many widgets. Like the difference between I think, I believe, it could be, and here's what's actually happening. That's like light and day. Okay? And you want to night and day. Sorry.
It's
you got the idea.
But light and day is an interesting
Freudian slip.
It was very interesting, I think, light and day, because doesn't have to be always. I
Right.
mean, it's the light that
Right.
really matters. So that's a good thing. Go
So you're
ahead,
going to
Anna.
separate yourself.
Yeah.
And data is what separates, is one thing you can do to separate yourself from all the I think I believes. So, again, go out, cobble together that first fort, get it out in front of some people, get them using whatever your product or service is, try it out. See, when you come back with that data to investors, partners, employees, whatever the people you need to take this to the next step, what you've done is separate yourself from just like 90% of the people out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's credibility, right?
And this data is true data. This is not like you're not lying. This is real, true data that matters.
And by the way, yeah, and data isn't like, hey, I read this report and there's 13 million, 30 to 35-year-old single males that are going to want this thing. That's not data. That's not the data I'm talking about. I'm talking about the data that that you hold that no one else has. That you put, I deal with tech, so I'll give you tech examples. I've put out this website, right? 20,000 people are coming to that website. 8,000 are, spending X amount of time. 14 have actually bought something, whatever it is, right? The difference between that and, well, I think if I build this website that sells widgets to 35-year-old males, that's how you do that.
Well, who's going to want to do? Think about yourself. If you have a chance of doing business with somebody who says, well, I think I'm doing this, as opposed to somebody who says they are. If I said to you, well, I kind of work with da-da-da, as opposed to this is what I do, who are you going to do business with?
It's like passive voice versus active voice.
Yeah,
like
that's a big difference.
That's when I earlier in the show, remember we talked about momentum, and I love when you could bringing data is telling me what kind of momentum. And by the way, if you do that as an investor, if you come to me today and tell me, right, X numbers, Y numbers, and 14 bought, and you come back together the next month and you say, now it's up to 50, and maybe even come back the next month or the next quarter, and now you're up to 100, not only is that momentum for your business, but now I'm finally starting to say, maybe they're onto something because they're doing what they said they were going to do. All of that I wrap up into this thing called credibility. And so either you have it, like I'm lucky enough, I can walk in and say, co-founder MapQuest sold for $1.2 billion. I'm lucky enough to have that as part of my calling card. If you don't have that, then you better figure out a way to create that for yourself. And it can be done. It's just going to take a little longer. Mm-hmm. There's no express train to Everest, I say.
No.
You have to go through all of these base camps, right?
And and if you're too close to yourself, sit with somebody and let them help you find that credibility for you, help you see it, help you feel it. That is very, very important. I mean, this is not a plug for myself, but yes, it is. That's it. But somebody like me who will do that for you, with you, listen to you, find out where you live, where your heart is, what your focus is, look at your business and help, and so that they help pull that out. Because sometimes you're too close to yourself and you haven't had enough opportunity to acknowledge who you are and what you've accomplished. I am doing it more and more for myself now. So I know what it feels like, and it feels really good. So until you get to that point, if you're not there, go find somebody who'll help you. It's very important.
Ask them the question, how can I best tell this story? What resonates best with you, right? Because, most of us feel very uncomfortable, right? Kind of figuring out how to describe ourselves. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I got other people to help me write my bio.
Absolutely.
Help me do it.
Absolutely. We were talking about this earlier because we were talking about MapQuest, and I said, there was a woman who wrote my bio, and she wrote Saves Lives. And I cringed because I thought, oh, save lives? How can I even acknowledge?
That's a little big.
That's so big. It's too big for me, right? So, we have to get that stuff out there, because I'm going to say this, and I've said this many, many times. We are a dime a dozen. I'm a business life coach. I do this, whatever I do, I am a dime a dozen. So I have to do things that are going to put me out there so that I for the work I want to do, whether it's my message that doesn't get lost in the dime a dozen, because maybe my message, just like my idea, is my message. Nobody else is going to take my message. It is my message. I own it. I have to put it out there, but there's a million messages. Even though we all might be different, we're all message carriers. We're a dime a dozen. So what am I going to do to get my message out there? What are you going to do to get your message out there? What are you going to do?
Build the fort.
Build a fort. Find people. Socialize your ideas.
Yep.
I mean, what else do you remember? Take a second. What else do you remember from today's show? Because this is a real impactful show. What do you remember from today's show that you can go like this? I remember this. That stuck out in your mind that you heard Chris say, whether it was him alone in our conversation. What did you hear that you can go and act on today? Don't put it off for tomorrow. Soon as, if you have to leave the show right now, you go right ahead and you go act on that idea. Act on making that phone call, because this is really important.
Yep. I can't wait to hear how people's journeys are affected. Like I said, I love this time of year. You know, I've kind of set up my goals for the next year. Everything from how I can do a better job doing what I do, how I can take the 2 or 3 kind of forts that I'm building right now and make them bigger, better, how I can take them to the next phase. I want to write another book.
About what? Can you share?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I have a couple ideas. One idea is actually a little bit more of the how-to. So just take kind of the build a fort concepts and then give you some specific tasks and things to do. I like the idea of breaking it down even more simply and saying, great, I want you to go tell me 5 ideas. All right, now take those 5 ideas. Here's a worksheet. I want you to go out and talk to 10 people, right? So just maybe putting that into play. The other thing that I've been thinking about is around communication and how to be a more effective communicator and how to get your message out. So lately I've been writing about kind of personal branding, which I almost hate the idea of what that is, but
Why?
I don't know if it sounds schlocky, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't really, I think the term and like networking also makes me feel the same way. But I know that I network every day effectively. And so I don't, anytime a word becomes too popular, then it, that's when it becomes schlocky.
So can I make a suggestion to you?
Yes, please.
Socializing his idea. I think you have a great talent for this. I wouldn't get hung up on the word yet. I would write the information.
Oh, I'm not hung up.
Okay, good.
I just do it when I say it out loud. It just makes me cringe.
Yeah, because you are so good at this, and you have such a gift for explaining what you're doing. I mean, because words really matter. Like, I feel the same way. I don't like using the same word that's so trendy sometimes in the work.
It gets watered down.
It gets watered down.
And it doesn't become my version of what I want that to be.
I agree with you so much. Like somebody was saying to me today about doing something, and she might be listening, I don't know. But she said something about New Year's Eve goals. And I said, let's come up with something else.
Right.
Because, I mean, everybody does that. Right? And again, going back to being the dime a dozen, you don't want to, it's, how many people are talking about stress? I mean, it's good to get away from that. And words really matter so much. But don't get hung up. Maybe a lot of other people get hung up on that. Don't get hung up. It's getting back to dotting every, I and crossing every T. Don't wait for that.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Get out there and.
Yeah.
I always say dive into the pool. The water's warm and it's safe.
Yeah, it is.
So dive in, even if you have to just dive in up to your ankles, right?
So, question: is there themes now that you notice in entrepreneurship? Any themes, trends that you can share that you from what you've seen, because you see so much?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, certainly we're starting to see a lot more of this millennial generation taking more active entrepreneurial roles, and it's very interesting both from they as founders and they as also the first hires into a company, and how you kind of build your company with that different mindset. There's how younger people think about their career, how they think about what's important to them. They're more project oriented than like time oriented. So it doesn't matter. doesn't matter that they don't put in 40 hours a week if they get all their job done, right? Like they think like that. So, and I think about that as it relates back to entrepreneurship. And I say to myself, all right, how best do I, as a supporter of entrepreneurs and having an entrepreneurial program, how do I support these people so that they can become the best entrepreneurs possible? So, I think that's something that's been, as I did a lot of reading over the holidays, that's something that's impacting me.
Which I think is really important because you do have this, your expertise is not jaded. Your expertise is so current as they are. So it's almost
Yeah,
like you're
it
the
has to be.
bridge. It's kind of like you're the bridge. And
Yeah.
one thing I notice about millenniums is they title their work. Like I've seen them on talk shows, I've seen them on Blab, I've seen them doing things. They title it with millennium in their title.
Yeah.
They are very clear that they are talking to millenniums. They are millenniums.
Yeah. And by the way, as non-millennials, we better be careful that we don't say, "Oh, well, that's just the whole millennial thing." Like we're the one who's going to get lost in the dust here. So we better figure that part out. And by the way, they're not going to adapt to our ways. We have to adapt. They're the largest part of the workforce. They're a majority. So, but interesting. It made me think about. I think the second thing that is most important to me that is a big trend is that I think there's an entrepreneurial kind of heartbeat in every community, regardless of the size. And we spend a lot of time going out through North Carolina, kind of been doing that for the last 5 or 6 months and kind of, pounding those drums and figuring out what's going on. Steve Case, former founder of AOL and a Big Cheese, and has a term he calls rise of the rest. And a couple times a year he gets on a bus and they make a tour through these kind of not New York, not DC, not the Valley, not Chicago, to these smaller communities and kind of waves the flag. And I'm a big believer that I believe that entrepreneurship can happen anywhere. And I mean, if I can do MapQuest in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right? I mean, you can do this anywhere. There might be kind of ceilings to where you get to, but you can start your idea and get it off the ground just about anywhere. So I think we're going to see more and more communities have kind of an entrepreneurial destination, a place, whether it's a co-working place or a place for meetups. And so that's all great for all your listeners to say, all right, it doesn't matter whether I'm in Charleston, West Virginia. I bet there's some group that's getting together. It's your tribe, and go connect with those people and become part of that community, because being around other people in your tribe is what also makes you smarter, better, faster, all those things.
And so the opportunities are everywhere. You can find them in your little town. You can find them in your big town. You can find them on your little computer. You can find them. There's so many opportunities. And you are doing things too, aren't you? You're going around North Carolina, or just North Carolina, or
right now
just camp?
Just North Carolina. We've been running a bunch of boot camps. They're 3 days, and there's no cost to you. We don't make any investment. We just take 8 or 10 companies in for about 3 days. We run them through some paces, teach them a lot, give them some feedback on their ideas, teach them how to kind of build the fort for the next 3 months, and then send them on their ways. And some of those may become investments for us later down the line, but it's part give back, part kind of marketing, part we get to kind of help these communities kind of go in and stir the pot, which is what we're good at, stirring the pot, shaking things up, and getting people excited about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, well, I'm excited.
Let's go.
Let's go. So tell everybody how they find you, what they find when they find you, and all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. So a couple ways to find me. First of all, you can head to thestartupfactory.co, which is the business I run with Dave and Lizzie, and that's an investment and entrepreneurship program that we run, and that's where people apply for the boot camps and for our formal investment program. And if you go through there and contact us, you can sign up for open office hours, or email us and everything. I mean, there's 3 of us, so we all get to see it. I also blog pretty heavily at Hively, HEIVLY.com. And I do a lot of the writings that kind of turn into the book, right? So I write for Inc. magazine, and those articles show up on my blog, as well as some other ideas. And then I have Build the Fort, which is the book And slowly but surely, we're putting out little pieces about the book around there. That'll come through Hively.com. You can sign up, get an email. Every time I write something, it'll get pushed to you, or you can pick up the feed. And those are my exercises. Those are my vehicles for shouting and sharing these days.
Well, those are good vehicles, and several of them are new, right?
Yes.
Within the last how long?
Almost all of it's new within the last kind of year to year and a half. Figuring out how to get my voice out there, which is a great marketing tool for me and the Startup Factory, is something I just came to a couple years ago, and just turning up the heat on that more and more. Trying to figure out how to write 2 or 3 times a week, which is not easy.
So have you figured it out?
Yeah.
What do you do?
What do I do? It's like the same advice I have given all of you. I have to be very intentional about it. So what I've set up in my calendar and talked to my partners about is that 3 days a week, first thing in the morning, which is when I and most people are at their most creative, I blocked off an hour and a half to do writing. And whether it's just a little article or whether it's a journal thing or whether that's going to be part of whatever the next book is. That's how I wrote this book all last year. And so what I'm going to, what I want to do is just make sure I block off that time. I don't put any meetings in that time. I've sent messages to my family and to both families, my wife and that family, as well as Dave and Lizzie, my other family. At that point is when I need to kind of block that off and get that out there. And sometimes it's crap and sometimes it's good, but writing is a muscle, I've learned, and the more you do it, the better it gets. So I had stopped doing that once I kind of got the first draft of the book out, and I occasionally do these other articles. I want to ramp that back up to be something very very active, and I enjoy it. So if I like it and I want it, need it, then I got to go do it, just like we've talked about. So best thing for me is I block off time and say that's my writing time.
And that's a really important. A lot of you out there want to do a blog or get yourself started in some direction. It's really good to do it in the morning.
Yeah.
You're less critical of yourself. The ideas flow and you haven't had time, right?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing I've learned about blogging and writing is that I can't. It's got to be in and out in 45 minutes. So when I write an article for Inc. magazine or for my blog, I take the idea, I rough it, I go through it a couple iterations, but by the time I'm done that writing period, that's published. In other words, no long 3-4 days agonizing. The key I've learned to blogging is more B quality is better than less A quality.
There you go. And that's really important. It's really important. It's even when when you have a message and you want to go on a video. That's why you have things like Periscope and things that have gotten it real simple.
Yeah.
You don't need a lot of heavy duty equipment to get this stuff done. It's just get your voice out.
You never know. And what I've found out is you never know which piece is going to resonate with somebody. So the more pieces you put out, the more chances you have of gathering a larger audience. And so why not do that? And that's why I want to be very intentional about more writing 2 to 3 times a week. Typically, when I started writing for Inc. magazine as a contributing writer, I wrote every 2 weeks. Then they said, we love your stuff. We need to build your audience. I was like, well, tell me one thing I can do, because I do have a day job, right? And they're like, write once a week. So after we did that for a while, my audience went up a little bit. I said, all right, what's the next thing I can do? They write twice a week. And so I've struggled with that. I've had to kind of hack my way through that. And then I was like, duh, Chris, let's set aside time. And I have a Word doc with 50 ideas. In fact, while we're sitting here, 2 more ideas popped in my head. I'll throw them in my idea list. And so when I sit down in the morning, I'll just sit there and say, all right, I'll look through the list, see if something isn't already inspiring to me, I'll look at my idea list to see, oh yeah, that was a good idea. And I think about it for a few minutes, and then I just start writing.
So we're out of time, but this little bit is very important. I call it like putting it on a parking lot so that it's parking it. It's not getting rid of it. So all your ideas put down somewhere, because you can use them for a blog. You can use them for a post. You can use them for God knows something. If it came to you, it's inspired, put it down. So that was a really good closing. So any another little closing before we go? final little couple words.
Build the fort, baby.
Build the fort, baby. And let us know which forts you build, and if we can help you build them, we will come. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I love it.
Please let us know. Contact me at marilyn@marilynshannon.com anytime. I would love to hear what you're doing. I'm inspired by you all. So thank you so much for showing up here. And Happy New Year again. And Chris. Oh, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, God, we love having you. Loved him the last time and love him even more this time. So thank you so much for being here.
You're
and
welcome.
Amnon, thanks.
Sure.
And Chris, we'll see you again for the...
Sounds great. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, let us know. Contact them. All right. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you all very soon. Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Help Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.